Spring training continues on and opening day is inching closer for the Philadelphia Phillies. But we have some news from some off the field conversation regarding the future of Kyle Schwarber. He enters the final season of his contract heading into this MLB season, but it does appear that there is interest on both sides for his tenure to continue in Philadelphia. I want to break down what we know at this point, as well as a couple other highlights that are going down in spring training. As always, do appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning into the channel here. And if you have not already, I do want to make sure that you guys are subscribed to the channel if you have not just yet. 71.5% of you guys have not subscribed that are tuning into these videos so far. So do want to get those numbers growing. We are baseball right around the corner of nonstop action. So getting closer every single day and want as many of you as possible as a part of it. So to start off with the story of what we have today, we do have from Matt Gelb of The Athletic, who says, quote, "The Phillies and Schwarber's camp have engaged in broad contract extensions this spring, according to major league sources, but nothing is perceived as imminent." And to add a little context to that, this coming from CBS here saying, "The Phillies and Kyle Schwarber had broad extension talks this spring, according to The Athletic. No deal is imminent, however. Schwarber will be a free agent after the season and has expressed a desire to remain with Philadelphia long term. He will earn $20 million this year, the final season on the 4-year, $79 million free agent contract he signed in March 2022. Schwarber, 32 next month, has hit 131 home runs with a .344 on-base percentage in 3 seasons with the Phillies. An extension could pay him $20 million or so for another 2 to 3 years. Schwarber is one of several prominent Phillies coming up in free agency, along with JT Realmuto and Ranger Suarez. Like Schwarber, Realmuto has expressed an openness to an extension." And it is interesting that those are paired. Obviously, we get the context of both these guys in the same contractual situation and both a pretty significant part of this Phillies core. But when kind of evaluating that you got to make upgrades or are trying to make changes, bring in fresh blood to this Phillies team, names do have to go. Now, with that being said, I do not want Kyle Schwarber to be one of those names. Now, we know what he brings to the table as a player, and to highlight his production from last year, we're talking about 38 home runs, 104 RBIs, 142 hits in his 573 at-bats there. Going to be 32 this season, but I still think plenty of good baseball still in his body. And beyond just that, there's a lot of intangible qualities that this team needs that he brings to the table. The leadership, the lead by example. It is no coincidence that every team that Kyle Schwarber is on ends up winning a lot of baseball games and in that playoff mix here. And by the way, it does feel like there's an increased chance that we may see him on the field a little bit this year, as he did line up and play some first base yesterday at spring training. Has been since 2021 with the Red Sox. That was the last time that he did that. But I thought he looked fairly comfortable given the circumstances there. And it wouldn't shock me that over the larger part of the season, that begins to be a bit of a plan. That on those Bryce Harper rest days, that maybe Kyle Schwarber steps into that role and is the guy holding down things at first base there. So all that type of positional versatility is always a great thing for a team to have options with it. And it is cool that Schwarber is open to that. He's a guy that with every single question that has been asked of him about the contract or about his role or where he will hit in the lineup, every answer is basically, I'm here to do what's best for the team. Wherever they want me, whatever position, whatever spot in the lineup, I'm willing to do it if it'll help this team. And that is what I think speaks volumes about who he is as a character. Now, when getting a little clarity for what this type of market value could be for Schwarber, I thought this article was interesting from MLBTradeRumors.com. And they start off saying, Schwarber is entering the final season of his 4-year free agent deal. The $79 million investment has paid off handsomely for the Phillies. He has hit .221, .344, and .488 with 131 homers and a little more than 2,000 plate appearances. Only Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani have hit more home runs over the last 3 seasons. Pretty good names to be right in the mix with right there. The 2-time All-Star has one of the sport's most extreme offensive approaches. He draws a ton of walks with huge power while striking out in almost 30% of his trips to the plate. While it's an unconventional profile for a leadoff hitter, Schwarber has been an impact pressure at the top of the lineup. Philadelphia would clearly take a hit to their offense if they let Schwarber walk. The question is what kind of investment they're willing to make to retain a bat-first player in his mid-30s. Schwarber turns 32 next week. An extension will cover his age 33 seasons and beyond. He started 5 games in left field last season. Retaining him would probably force the Phillies to keep Nick Castellanos in right field for 2026, the final season of his less successful 5-year contract. Castellanos could otherwise move to DH for next season. And a quick note on that, I think that was a little bit harsh on Castellanos. He hasn't been quite what he's been paid to be, but he was excellent in that playoff run last year. I think he deserves a little more credit than he gets for how much he has improved defensively in right field. I understand he's not perfect. He's not going to be winning any sort of gold gloves anytime soon. And the mobility out there isn't awesome. But the dude tries. That like sliding grab that he does have is really like legitimately part of his bag at this point that he does often. And he just competes out there. So while Cassie is not perfect, I do ride or die with Cassie to an extent. I think he deserves a little more credit for him pulling his weight in his field, considering the expectations and what we knew about him coming in. There was basically zero from a defensive standpoint. And Schwarber in this same exact shift in the franchise that they went all in on this offense. Both Castellanos and Schwarber represent that in a little different ways, but I think that was a little bit hard on Castellanos. Now, to continue on in this article here, it says, Schwarber is taking some first base reps in camp this year. He could step in for Bryce Harper on occasion throughout the season, which would be his first action there since he logged 75 innings with the Red Sox in 2021. He's likely to continue getting a few scattered starts in left. He's not quite an exclusive designated hitter, but the majority of his work will come as the DH. He's a well below average defender in left field. Again, a little tough, but that one's a little more fair, I would say. The Phillies will pay Schwarber $20 million for the upcoming season. He'd be eligible for a qualifying offer next winter. He'd be very likely a QO recipient if he has a typical year. That entitled the Phillies to 2026 draft compensation if he walks, but it'd be a pick after the 4th round because of their luxury tax status. That's of modest value to a team that's squarely in win-now mode. Another 4-year deal will be a tough sell at Schwarber's age. Corner bats and or designated hitters have recently been held to 3 years or contracts starting at 33 and above. That can come at a solid annual value. Teoscar Hernandez received a deferred $66 million guarantee to re-sign with the Dodgers on a 3-year deal. And to finish off this here, continues, even if Schwarber is limited to 3 years, his next contract could come with a higher annual value than the $19.75 million average on his current deal. The Phillies already have 6 players on deals that'll pay at least $18 million in 2026. Zack Wheeler is making $42 million annually through 27. Harper, Trey Turner, and Aaron Nola are on significant contracts running into the 2030s. The Phillies face potential free agent departures of Ranger Suarez and JT Realmuto after this season. They've reportedly shown some interest in a Realmuto extension as well. Philadelphia's competitive balance tax payroll this year is close to $308 million, according to Roster Resource. That puts them at the highest penalization tier. They've paid the tax in 3 straight seasons, so they're facing the top level of repeat penalties. Their 2026 tax estimate drops to $185 million, but that doesn't account for the arbitration raises for the likes of Alec Boehm, Jesus Luzardo, Bryson Stott, and Brandon Marsh. So a lot going on in those paragraphs here. The point being that I think should be recognized a little more, the Phillies are spending money, man. They are going all in and doing everything possible. And while you can point questions at where that money is allotted to, the bottom line is this team is trying to win and has the pockets to do so. That they are investing with every intention of competing with the likes of the rest of the MLB, and Kyle Schwarber is a huge part of that equation. Now, what I do think is interesting about this overall dance here, obviously there's a laundry list of names that were added to. The most pressing, I guess the most connected in this situation, I think absolutely are Kyle Schwarber, Ranger Suarez, and JT Realmuto. Now, the Ranger situation, I think is very interesting to me. It does feel, and rightfully so, he is trying to get top dollar, that he has changed representation from an agency standpoint, that they are stacking the deck, I would say, to make sure that they are maxing out. I love Ranger Suarez. I do not want to see Ranger Suarez pitch in another uniform, and depending on what that type of value is, will be very interesting to see if it'll be in Philadelphia or not. That feels to me a guy that they have sort of their number for, that they're not willing to go above, and if there's another team that is, we may see Ranger Suarez pitching for them next year. Now, with that being said, I also think Rangers run a little bit of risk that he has to deliver this season. This is a high-pressure season for Ranger Suarez for the future of his contractual obligations there. We've seen Ranger Suarez look like a dominant pitcher, and let's just think back to the first half of last year for how good he looked. We've also seen Ranger look like a almost mediocre pitcher and pretty night and day different for what he looked like in the second half of the season. So this is going to be a high-pressure season for Ranger Suarez. I do think it's going to be very price-dependent, the outlook here. For JT Realmuto, a more complicated question, I would say. How does his knees hold up this season as he continues to these advanced ages of his career? Is there actually credence to this theory that if you take a little bit of a load off him behind the plate where he's not as active in the field on a game-by-game basis, that his power numbers do increase, that the plate appearances and the approach at the plate looks incredibly much better because there is not as much wear and tear on his body? That is the belief from the Phillies going into that season, but we have to see that in actuality. We have to see that play out before I'm willing, and I think they should be willing, to invest any sort of money in him in the long term. The bottom line is the time limit on catchers is not a lot, and JT has done a lot to, I guess, break that stereotype to an extent, but you got to wonder. Father Time is undefeated, and he's not stopping this battle with JT Realmuto. And then that brings us to Kyle Schwarber, who I think is the most, I would say, clear-cut outlook from here. We want Kyle Schwarber on this baseball team. Kyle Schwarber wants to be on this baseball team. I understand cost is a factor. The only real dance that I think is going in here is his contract going to be more valuable right now, or is it going to be more value next offseason? That if he wants to have this all-in push, this I can have a great year and maximize my money, that might be the approach from Kyle Schwarber here. And from the Phillies' perspective, they're probably pretty open to that, given that his value is pretty high. This guy led the MLB in home runs not long ago. He's been a staple of this franchise as a leadoff hitter, really leaning into this style. I would say Kyle Schwarber exemplifies or is the clear-cut example of the way that they play. That they are the all-in approach. They're going to try and mash home runs. They are not going to play this small ball tactic. That's who Kyle Schwarber is, and that's why he is a part of it. Now, granted, with all that being said, they also have really invested in the pitching standpoint, that it does feel that's shifting a little bit more in their identity. Even so, I think Kyle Schwarber is enough of a winning player that you find a way to keep him on this team, but it will be interesting to see if we have any of those conversations continue as the season continues to inch closer. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Are you in the same page that you want Kyle Schwarber on this Phillies team pretty much regardless of the price point and what happens from here? Drop your thoughts below. And one more time, do want to remind you guys to make sure you are subscribing. Just 28.5% of you guys watching these videos are subscribed thus far. We just passed 3,000 subscribers here on Phillies Digest and want to keep that number growing. So baseball is right around the corner. Want as many of you along for the ride as possible. So make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like on this video. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.